Let's start with college.
College.
College. You before that, where'd you grow up, Ben?
Well, I grew up in the People's Republic of Berkeley, right across the way there.
Beach Stanford.
Yeah, Berkeley. Berkeley's not really about sports anyway. It's more about communism and weed. But.
So
Pete's Coffee.
What Pete's Coffee, communism, and weed. But how else did Berkeley influence your entrepreneurial bent, do you think?
Yeah, well, Berkeley, when you're a teenager, you tend to be rebellious and not want to do kind of what your parents do or what the establishment does. And the establishment in Berkeley was hippies. So that kind of caused me to want to be the opposite of a hippie. And so I joined the football team, and I, was kind of just oriented around like what was going on in the world and wanting to be part of the society that I was definitely counseled to stay away from. So it was kind of good in that way, although I have a great feeling for Berkeley now that I'm no longer rebelling against it. I see more value in some of the hippie culture and all these kinds of things. But that the rebellion has kind of drove me from being a communist to being a venture capitalist.
Well, let's take the journey on that transformation. Yeah. You went to college at Columbia and UCLA. What'd you study, and what's your memories of that?
Yeah, well, I studied computer science, and in those days, when I got to Columbia, computer science was a little bit of a kind of frowned upon major, if you can believe it, given what's going on today. In that there was a big debate in academia at that time that computer science wasn't really science, that electrical engineering, that was like real. And that software was just like the tools you use to program the computer. Like it wasn't like there was nothing to it. It was kind of a thin layer, and it didn't warrant its own major. Like it may be a class, but not a major. And so everybody in the major was like, what are these guys, idiots? They ought to actually try and understand like how a compiler works and so forth, and then make that claim. But that was kind of the beginning for me.
It's a funny sort of question, perhaps, but what do you wish you had learned or spent more time in? I've just been thinking about that myself. I went to Berkeley, and first time I've ever admitted it here. But 3 times. But I was an undergraduate engineer, and I avoided sociology and psychology classes. Of course, now being an entrepreneurship professor here for 20 years, that's exactly the roots of entrepreneurship. So what are your regrets, if any, about what you studied?
Well, it's funny because when I was in college, the thing that I thought I was doing that was a huge waste of time was I was completely obsessed with rap music. And I would listen to it constantly, and to the point where in those days there were no rap radio stations, and there was no Yo MTV Raps hadn't come out yet or any of that stuff. And so there were only 2 rap shows, and they were only on one day a week on Saturday night. So I would never go out on Saturday night. I would sit at home because I had to record them. And then in those days, it wasn't like these fancy like record to disc. You had a like tape. You would press record, and then when it got to the end of the tape, you had to be there to flip it around and do it. And then if you were smart, you would be there to pause on all the commercials so that you could get more life out of your tape. So I missed like all that college life, and I was like, wow, I probably wasted a lot of time. But now like my whole career is kind of based on my affiliation with rap music. So it's what I'm known for. So that turned out to be good. I kind of wish I had studied more biology. I didn't. I was very interested in it, and I did not realize at the time that kind of information science and biology would connect when they did, or in the way they did. I studied a little neurology in graduate school as part of AI, which was also seemed like a complete waste of time because AI didn't work for like 25 years. But now it's working. So you never know. I guess I would say, anything that you learn is a good use of your time, probably.
Well, let's drill on that for a minute. What skills can these students learn, you think, while in college, in addition to perhaps technical We're in the engineering school, so let's assume they're getting a great dive into technical matters and science, but what about the rest of the skills that will serve them well, no matter what they do?
Yeah, so, you know, in the world of entrepreneurship, the big skills are kind of programming skills and people skills, like those are the big two. And I think people skills tend to be highly underestimated in terms of kind of just ability to run a company and so forth. And what I mean by people skills is the ability to understand other people's motivation and other people's motivations who you're talking to and then who you're also not talking to, and how they're going to think about something and where they're coming from, and relate to that in a way that gets you to the right conclusion about how you build an organization or build a company or you know, make a deal or any of these kinds of things is incredibly valuable. And that's what I would say most of the kind of good entrepreneurs end up lacking more than the technical skills that we see now. Like being like a boss level engineer, like that's extremely valuable. I'm not discounting that, but that's really the other big skill that you can learn in school.
And we've seen that in engineering education and curriculum. It's added a great deal of those kinds of skills and behaviors and techniques since since we were in school. The other thing I want to talk to you about when I think back is you came out of school and then the internet came upon us as an opportunity, and it's defined your professional career.
Yeah.
I'm a little ahead of you in life. And so 10 years before that was software. It was software on a personal computer. And I got so lucky that to be in software, you always thought, in my early days, you thought you had to go work at a mini computer or a mainframe company, which was really boring, programming this. So packaged software was just this big change that I fell into with a lot of luck at Symantec and so on. For you, were you brilliant to see that opportunity, or was it just so obvious that it just drew you in and it's been your life?
Well, yeah, so in the beginning, because I ran into the internet long before I kind of moved my career that way. But in the early days, so, when I kind of first interacted with the internet, it was, it was slightly after DNS was invented. For those of you guys, I don't even know, like it may be too low-level plumbing. But DNS is a system where you map the domain, the name of the computer to the IP address, and like how that gets looked up. Get host by address, get address by host, whatever. But DHCP, which is basically the protocol that gets you your IP address, so like when you connect into whatever your Wi-Fi hotspot and so forth, then you like get the address, like that had not been invented yet. So the way you got on the internet when I got started is you'd like call a guy and you would say, "Can I have an IP address?" You remember. And he'd be like, okay, like here's a 4-octet number, and you'd go in and you'd edit your file etchost, and you'd put in your 4-octet number, and there was, depending on your version of Unix, there'd be some other file you had to edit. And so, and then it was all text-based, and we had email on it at that point. And it was obvious that the plumbing was going to get standardized because there were these other kinds of rival plumbing systems like, NetBIOS or NetBEUI or LANman or SNA that were just they were vendor specific. So it was there's going to be one network. But the internet, the way we think of the internet today, was not at all obvious at that point. But then when actually my partner, Mark, built Mosaic, and I saw that for the first time, and there wasn't that much on it. There was a guy who was monitoring his coffee maker to know when it ran out so he could go get coffee. And then there was some guy in London put his restaurant menu. He had an Indian restaurant. They put that on the internet. And those were the things that were up there. But it was oh, wow, this is going to be everything. Because I had enough of a basis and understanding to go, and I called my wife who's sitting here, Felicia. I was like, get the kids. We're moving to Netscape. That's it. This is definitely the future, no question. But I had a big, if I had just seen Mosaic, it might not have been so obvious, but I kind of had seen all the other stuff and I hadn't quite gotten there yet.
And you were working for a big company initially out of school.
Well, Silicon Graphics.
Silicon, yeah. So I want to talk. Can we talk a little bit about that? Because I was talking to my undergraduate class this morning, and a number of them are seniors, and they're thinking about life after Stanford. And it made me, in getting ready to chat with you, I thought about what's happened in this room the last month, and many of these folks were there. Matt Rogers from Nest went to Apple right out of, I think, CMU, I think. I get that right. Lou Cerny came out of Dartmouth and went right to Apple as well. And you did Silicon Graphics. But those are, is that just old school? I mean, is that just old, bad pun, but is that just last decade or decade before? Or is there value now to work for an established company out of school?
There's definitely value. It's kind of the same value that there was when I did it. So when you come out of school, you know some things and there's a whole lot that you don't know. And there's kind of advantage and disadvantage in building a company at that point in your life. But the big disadvantages in the things that you get from a big company are, one, you really have no idea how to run a company or manage a company. And going to a big company, that's where I learned how to manage. And it wasn't so much that there were like great managers who managed me or something like that, but the way you learn how to run a big organization is to work in a big organization, because it's the frustrations you have trying to get something done that basically become the basis for the design of the organization when you're on the other side. Because you're like, okay, if I was an engineer and it was taking me, an hour to like check something into the source code tree and then like 12 hours to build it, like that would be a nightmare. So now I'm back, running the company. I know that that's going to be an issue. Or if like it took me a week to get a decision made, like how frustrated would I be? Whereas like you talk to a CEO right out of Stanford who's never been through that, and they've got guys sitting there like not being able to get a decision made, and they're like, what's the problem? And it's like, well, that's why you've got like all the attrition, nobody wants to work for you. But it's harder to figure out, like if you've never worked in a company, like why that would be such a big problem to like not be able to work for a week on anything because you're waiting for somebody to make a decision who doesn't think it's important enough to give it the time of day. And so these are the kinds of things that you learn, and there's like a million details around that, which you just can't learn. Like it is not intuitive. I like guarantee you nobody figures out how to do that on their own. And that is the best way to learn it. So that's the first thing. And then the second thing is you meet people who, like people at Apple, like people at Facebook, people at Google, like smart people. And you kind of build a reputation so that if you go to build a company, like those are people whose skills and who you can draw upon and who you can hire and work with and build something really excellent. And then the third thing is you kind of learn about the world. And the basis of a good company is to basically figure out something about the world that nobody else knows. And then that secret becomes the company. And if you've not been in the world, like then your basis for the secret is you just have a more limited scope of what you might have learned. Now, there are people who learn stuff in school that is a big enough secret, like Mark Zuckerberg figured out Facebook while he was at Harvard. Like, absolutely. If you have an idea that big, then by all means, go for it. But like if you don't, and you try and go build a company with zero management skill and no network, that's hard, bro. That's going to be hard. Like, and you have to think, like, who would want to work for you? Like, and it's like, unless it's like, well, everybody smart will want to work for me because I've got the breakthrough idea of all times and it's running away like a freight train and it's growing like nothing else ever, then yeah, definitely start a company. But if you don't have that and you try and do it, and you're competing with like Tony Fadell, who like invented the iPod and is also starting a company for engineers, like where would you work? Would you work for you? Would you work for Tony? And that's the kind of thing you have to figure out.
I've got so many questions to ask you in different directions that we could go in. How many of you have heard about his book? Yeah, I mean, there's been a few really cool books come out this year. Peter Thiel's book came out. Walter Isaacson has done a really cool book about history of Silicon Valley and so on. And look, the hard thing about hard things, which is just where did that title come from? Because that's just a way cool title. The hard thing about hard things.
Well, I actually wrote that title myself, which I understand is like actually pretty rare in the book business that they let you keep your own title. But where it came from was, you know, well, when I was a CEO, it was easy time. I slept like a baby. I woke up every 2 hours and cried.
And you drum roll on that.
And you know, when I would be up, and this is not a joke, it's actually true, you can ask my wife, I'd be up at 3 o'clock in the morning just sitting there going, why are none of the management books that I'm reading helping me? Like, they are no help at all. And I read literally every management book. And, you know, I realized that, you know, management books are generally written for like, here's how to not screw up your company. But if you start a company, that lasts like a week. And then you've screwed it up. And then like, where's the book for that? You know? And that's what was missing. So I would think about it. I'd be like, okay, yeah, so like all the VCs and everybody tells me, you know, Ben, you know what the key to a great company is? You know, hire 8 players. And I'd be sitting there like, oh, great, because I was going to hire a bunch of fucking idiots. And now you've unlocked the secret for me. Thank you. But you know, like that wasn't like that way. And I was like, the hard thing is not to like hire the best people, right? Like the hard thing is when your company is going like this, and the best people don't want to work for you. And then like, who do you hire? And like, how does that work? And like, you know, do you hire the person who's like okay across the board, or do you hire the person that's got something like horribly wrong with them, but like super great about them? And like, how do you think about that? And like, what do you do with the horribly wrong stuff once you get them? You know, that's the hard thing. And then there's like, you know, I read this, the Jim Collins books, which I hate. But some of you like them, I know. It doesn't mean you're not smart if you like them, because a lot of smart people like them. But the thing that he does is he makes you feel good about yourself, like, but then when you get into it, you realize cause and effect is all like swung around and all these things. But he's like, what great companies have is a big, hairy, audacious goal. And I like that's great, but that's not hard. Like, it's pretty easy to write a big, hairy, like, we're going to go to the moon, you know, like, we're going to build the biggest company in the world. We're going to have software on every desktop. It's all going to be ours. Like, that's our goal. Okay, so now you've missed your goal. And like, not only did you miss your goal, but you build up your whole company to achieve your goal, and you have a cost structure that's designed to hit your goal, and you missed your goal, and you're running out of cash, and the company's burning to the ground, and all of the company, everybody who works for you thinks you're a moron because you missed your goal. Okay, that's hard. Like, that's the hard thing. Like, what do you do there? Well, that's not in Jim's book. Like, he didn't even talk about that. It's like nobody ever misses their goal who's a great company. So, like, why would you miss your goal? Like, you must not be great. It's like, okay, fuck Jim. So anyway, that's where the hard thing about hard things comes. Some of you are already entrepreneurs, I can tell.
I just want you to translate the F word for our friends from Uruguay.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry.
Does that translate?
Yeah, I've got CEO Tourette's syndrome. So.
Oh, my goodness. Well, that was a bit of a wartime CEO rant just then. I mean, talk about this peacetime versus wartime CEO in the context. I mean, since we're on the book, and it is a lot from you opened up and talked about what it was like to run the company. Let's talk about that difference.
Yeah, so, and it really is a difference in wartime and peacetime. It's really a difference in the decision-making process. And the reason that I kind of wrote that piece, Wartime CEO, Peacetime CEO, is that if you read in the management literature, it's almost entirely written for peacetime CEOs. So like everything you learn about decision making, you know, and delegation and don't micromanage and all these things are very peacetime oriented in the sense that in peacetime, you're much more focused on the development of the people and the development of the organization over the long term, and the ability for the organization outside of yourself to make higher quality decisions, and then also kind of be creative outside of the mission, and that's kind of all affordable if like you've got, say, you know, like you've got Google search and you're just like steamrolling through the industry, then you can do a lot more kind of peacetime sort of things. On the other hand, right, if you're running out of cash, or if you're like Apple when Steve Jobs first took over and they had 3 weeks of cash left and so forth, like you can't actually, like that's not affordable in the decision-making process. You've got to get to a very accurate decision extremely quickly. And that's when you kind of have like that's when the wartime techniques come into play. And sometimes in wartime, you end up doing things that actually do undermine the development of the organization, because there's more burden on the CEO to make a much larger number of decisions, because accuracy is so important. And the CEO, by virtue of her position, has got more knowledge to make those decisions, and more authority too, to make them definitive and fast and high quality. So that is a lot about what that was about. And I thought, a lot of it came from Andy Grove has a great book called Only the Paranoid Survive, which a lot of you probably have read here. But there's a part of it where he talks about when he turned Intel from the memory business into the CPU business, which is like a real wartime story. Like it's like, okay, like I walked into the room and I was like, okay, what would we do if I was fired tomorrow, and then like somebody came in to replace me, and then my whole staff was fired and replaced all of them? What would they do with the business? And then like I walked out to the car, like I had a cigarette, I looked out into the distance, I was like, all right, we got to lay off 80% of the people. And those kinds of things they're just not things that you kind of normally encounter in the business education, but in the real business world, that's like most of it. Most of it ends up being wartime, particularly in startup world, like a huge amount of it ends up being wartime. So that's kind of the basic.
On a related post, and I don't want to miss this opportunity, especially for the students in the room, and thinking in particular the undergrads, to hear it directly from you. These leadership and entrepreneurial traits that we talk about in terms of starting a company. You were here a couple of weeks ago with Sam's course talking about starting a startup or something is the name of the course. So there's a lot of emphasis on starting the company, but the real hard stuff comes after some success. And so the skills and the behaviors it takes to start a company, is that the same as it takes to scale it and grow it? Or which ones are similar and which ones are not?
Well, so look, startups get really hard when the product gets into market. And those of you who've done it know this, right? Like when you're building the product, it's all good. How's your startup? It's doing fantastic. We're building the product, it's going to be great. It's so genius. Like everybody I tell about it kisses me on the lips and says, wonderful. But then you get in market and nobody wants it. Like then it gets real hard, real fast. So that's like kind of the first psychological trauma. But the initial skill is, can you build a great product? Can you build a product that a lot of people really want for whatever reason? And that is different than kind of building a great company. And but if you can't build a great product, it doesn't matter if you can build a great company, because you don't belong at a startup, because if you can't build a great product, you'll never get to the great company. And that was actually a big error in the 90s. And a lot of the lean startup methodology and so forth came out of the mistakes that were made in the 90s, where they'd bring in a professional CEO really early on who didn't know how to build a great product and would build the company to a giant size and burn up all the cash. But the skills are different. But like management is a learned skill. It's not like nobody was born a great manager. And I think that's one of the things people run into is you feel like, oh, well, like that person over there just seems like such a natural manager, but like it's not, nobody's really that natural at it. It's an unnatural.
What you know now.
Oh yeah, it's a very unnatural job. Like, so I'm having this conversation with you, and if I, if I stopped you and it's like, Tom, like the way you asked me that question, like it was okay, but like you didn't really have the right emphasis at the end, and go back and practice and come back tomorrow and do it again. Like if I said that to you, you would be like, that guy's an asshole. And so like anthropologically, like you don't want to do that, because if everybody doesn't like you, then they're going to feed you to the lion or whatever. So like it's not natural, but like as CEO, as a manager, that's what you have to do. You have to evaluate people's performance, you have to correct them, you have to make sure they're on task. And those kinds of motions or you have to learn how to do them, and you have to learn how to do them in a way that everybody doesn't hate you all the time. They're going to hate you some of the time.
But you just screwed up my night, because now I'm going to go home and my perfectionism is going to take over, and I'm going to say, I really didn't ask that question correct. So I'm going to lay awake at night. Oh, can we talk about A16Z?
Sure.
First of all, who came up with that for the first time? I mean, Andreessen Horowitz. Who was it, you or Mark?
Andreessen Horowitz or A16Z?
Yeah, I didn't.
Which one?
Oh, A16Z. Let's do
So
that.
I came up with A16Z. That was mine. That's me, baby.
And then, so let's back up. Why did you and Mark start a firm in, 2009, 5 years ago? Why did you start a VC firm?
So it's really a simple idea, which kind of started on a thing that he got like really fired up about, which is he's like, Ben, it's so crazy that when we look at the companies that you and I really like, you look at like Amazon, Hewlett-Packard, Microsoft, Oracle, any kind of great technology company, Google and so forth. They're either like run by their founders or their founders are like right at the top of the company. Like the founder is like essential to every long-lasting tech company, IBM. But the Silicon Valley way, the way of venture capital, is to replace the technical founder with a professional CEO. So like, are we just like focused on building like mediocre companies here? Like, why is that? And so, I was like, that's kind of right. Having been a like technical founder CEO, like that was like the very first meeting with my venture capital firm was like, when are you going to get a real CEO? And so we thought there ought to be a firm that is designed for the technical founder to enable the technical founder to run basically her own company. And with the basic idea being, we came to the conclusion that it's easier to teach the innovator how to be a CEO than to teach a CEO how to be an innovator. Particularly in a domain that you've transplanted them into, where it wasn't their invention, it was somebody else's that you're kind of trying to advance. And that was that was basically the idea for the firm, and we thought that was startup type stuff. You thought it was a good idea, so you go ahead and try it. It did turn out. We refined the idea a lot. We said, okay, well, what do you need to be a CEO if you're just like an inventor? And it's like, well, first, it'd be great to have somebody on your board who's actually like started a company and been a CEO. And so our first thing was like, our motto was some experience required, to go on your board, which is very unusual. Like most venture capitalists have not like run companies, and certainly not founded and run companies. And then the next part was, we felt like the network, like that was the really thing that like made the VC's eyes pop out of their head. It's like, oh, that guy's network. He knows all these customers. He knows all these executives. He can build a team like really fast, and it's going to be awesome. And so we thought, well, like, what if the firm like was that network? Like, what if we just built the firm into a giant network where we knew like every important customer and every great executive and every great engineer? What would that look like? And that's why we have 100 people at Andreessen Horowitz, and 8 investing partners, and like most other firms are kind of the opposite kinds of ratio and much fewer people, because we wanted to build the professional CEO network for the inventor CEO.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I went on the web and I look at your site, and I'd suggest you do that as well. Look at A16Z site and look under the people or about the team or what have you. And you'll see these 100 employees in different categories. Some in marketing, some in business development, some in board members. I forget the other categories. Finance and operations.
Finance, technical talent.
Yeah, sure. Across the board. And then look at the sites of the other firms. It's quite remarkable. So in the fight, let's just also, since we're a bit on metrics of the firm, and then let's talk philosophy. The first fund was how much?
300 million.
300 million. So you raise it from other folks, and then you go out to invest it, and that was 5 years ago. And now, how much total capital are you managing?
4.7 billion.
Wait a minute.
That's a lot of Skrilla. Sorry. I got excited there.
What was that in your mind when you started 5 years ago, or did that happen organically? I mean, I wouldn't say accidentally, but did you imagine you'd be managing almost $5 billion?
So like one of the things we knew from being entrepreneurs, and this is a very, very key point in entrepreneurship, is that it is just as much work and just as traumatic to build a company that's trivial and nobody cares about than it is to build like a really significant, important thing. Like it's the same amount of work, so you might as well try to do something important. And so that was always our thought with the firm. We were like, we are gonna our goal is to be the most important venture capital firm in the world. And like it's a completely megalomaniacal and arrogant and idiotic. But that's like, if you don't have that attitude as an entrepreneur, like you should not be an entrepreneur. So yeah, we were always gonna be the biggest. We were always gonna be the best. And that was the goal, and there was no reason to exist if we weren't going to do that. Now, did we expect to get there that fast? No, of course not. That would be ridiculous. We thought it was going to take much, much longer. But we always thought, like, if we can get there, like a big thing in venture capital is size, because one, for an entrepreneur to know that you've got a firm who's not just going to give you $500,000 for your seed round, but then when you need the next round, it's still got money. Like that's actually a big deal. But then in our model, the other thing that was important is in order to build the network, we needed to be like one of the bigger, more important funds, because building the network costs money. And the bigger the fund, the more fees you have, the more money you have. And so we could redirect those fees. Rather, we didn't pay the general partners much money, but we pay everybody else in the firm. And so that was all part of the theory of that.
Well, I'm trying to think of some questions that might not be asked, too often of you. Just the success in terms of head count and fund size is remarkable. What about the conventional VC firms that you admire? There must have been a set, you're saying,
they're really good firms.
That you kept. Yeah. In other words, the core principles that you brought forward, because the brand you've built in 5 years is just, it's over the top in terms of impact. And and you've been very disruptive. But what was the conventional pieces that you kept?
Yeah, so we spent a lot of time with Andy Ratcliffe, who is on my board and actually teaches here at Stanford often. And he had a bunch of philosophies that we adopted, and we still think about to this day. He was from Benchmark. Yeah. And one of them was just look. 90. He had done various studies, but somewhere between like 90 and kind of 97% of the returns for like any given year of all the companies that get venture funded is concentrated into like 15 of them. And and Peter Thiel talks about that a lot in his book and so forth. But that's a really I would say counterintuitive principle, and very important. A lot of the design of the firm was around this, that like if you can get make investments in some significant percentage of those top 15, then you're going to be a good fund, and if not, you're going to basically lose all your investors' money. That's the easy principle, which is kind of why all the returns go to like 5 firms every year. Like if you study venture capital, when we started, there were I think 800 venture capital firms. There's a lot less now. But all the returns went to not only like 5 firms every year, but the same 5 firms for like 30 years. And the reason was that the best entrepreneurs would only take money from the best venture capital firms, and the best venture capital firms up until kind of, I would say like up until really us, were mainly determined by their results. Like, so, what companies had you funded in the past? So it was an awesome business model because it was self-perpetuating. Like as long as you were at the top, you were very likely to stay at the top. We were able to kind of crack that open by doing something that was really unconventional at the time, which is not unconventional at all anymore, which was marketing. So we were sort of the first venture capital firm to super aggressively market itself. And we had a unique position and a very aggressive marketing idea. And that sort of opened it up to say, well, like they may have a much longer track record than us, but we will tell you exactly how we think about building a company. Like everything from like how you hire, how you conduct a layoff, like how you think about capital raising, like everything. We were going to lay it all out in great detail. And up to that point, the industry was just super opaque. Like you didn't know. It was all like the man behind the curtain, which was actually a very good strategy for the people who were winning. It was just a bad strategy for new firms. But new firms tended to just adopt what the old firms were doing. So that was the big breakthrough. It's not a breakthrough. You couldn't break through that way now because everybody markets their venture capital firm. But we got through in time, so yay.
I'm going to open it up here in a couple of minutes for questions from the audience, but I can't help it. What are some companies that excite you now? We know the big winners you've invested in, but it's always fun to think about the potential game changers, at least in your view.
Yeah, well, everything's exciting. We love them all the same. We love all of our children. One company that's really exciting is a company called Databricks, which is guys out of Berkeley, and they invented this technology called Spark. And so those of us who kind of like are in the industry, there's been this thing called MapReduce and Hadoop, which some of you are probably familiar with. And the thing about, and Hadoop has got like crazy momentum in the world and the market and so forth, but anybody who's kind of gone in and tried to program MapReduce or dealt with it knows like the technology is a little left up. In multiple ways. One, it's just like hard to deal with, it's hard to program, it's hard to use, but it's also has technological assumptions that are already starting to get out of date. For example, like one big assumption in MapReduce is like things are on disks and network speeds are slow, so that you've got to farm out the work to a lot of nodes, have it computed, and then like sent back up. But you don't want to be doing computations across the network because that's going to kill you. So that is kind of fading, and these guys have come up with basically a much better programming model and a much faster kind of solution than MapReduce, and it's got great momentum, and they're geniuses, and I think it's going to kind of take over big data. So I'm like really fired up about that one. Another company. So here, this is a funny story of kind of how venture capital works. So there's a company that we invested in called Teespring. And inside the company, so Teespring, on the surface, basically makes T-shirts. It's much more than that, but like this is the thing about venture capital. Like we invest in things that look like bad ideas but are really good ideas. And this one really did look like a bad idea when we first saw it. It's like T-shirts. Like how big can that be? But what it really is a platform for converting your social capital into actual money, and it works like unbelievably. And in the conversation about whether we should invest or not, like most people were saying, like, we cannot invest in this, it's T-shirts, like, you're out of your mind, like, what are you doing? And it wasn't even me who was the one who was out of his mind, it was somebody else, another partner. And then one of our partners said, well, this is one that doesn't work in theory, it only works in practice. And it has continued to work in practice amazingly well. So those are three.
Well, thanks for sharing that. So let's open it up to questions. We've got a few minutes here. How about right here on the aisle?
Hi, thanks for being here, Ben. I wanted to ask you, you mentioned wishing that you had taken more courses in biology and the intersection between biology and information science. And I'm wondering, specifically related to Jawbone, how do you see that space converging, and what do you think Jawbone needs to do to really differentiate themselves from their competitors in that industry? Yeah,
so and Jawbone's actually a whole another dimension on it too. So Jawbone makes devices that monitor your health from sleep to steps to heart rate and so forth. And a lot of it is so part of it is how do you collect the data in a way that's not like obnoxious, where it like looks cool and like it's it's fun to wear and those kinds of things. But then the other thing is, what kind of insights do you get from it? And I think they're doing actually quite a good job of building a data platform for not only a data platform, but a team of people who are really deriving insights from across a population. Like what's the normal amount of sleep that people get? And I think they've already conducted like the largest sleep study of all times and things like that. But these kinds of things of, like, okay, people like, and then you start to segment that, like, okay, people my age, from with my genetics, what kind of sleep do they get? And am I below or under on that? So I think the next thing is to get like the 23andMe data into the Jawbone platform, and you start to put that together, and you really start to understand where you are in terms of your actual health against where it should be with people who are kind of like you and what you should be eating and all that kind of thing.
Let me check in the back of the room. Oh, Bal, let me see. I'm looking for some. Way in the back, next to the camera.
Let's say that you are the technical founder and you're simultaneously trying to juggle between that, being the product lead, and also being the chief evangelist biz dev guy. As the company grows, obviously all three of those vectors are going to pull on you. Which of those would you say is first to be delegated away, and how would you think about that decision?
Can you repeat the question just in case?
Yeah, so it's okay, what if you're the technical founder, you're like the head engineer, the chief evangelist, the number one designer, and like you can't do them all indefinitely, so which one do you delegate first? So I don't actually think that's probably, it's probably less of a functional question and more of a, like, when do you find somebody that you trust that can replace you in those things? Because you only get leverage, and this is something that is really tricky for founding CEOs to get to, but you only get leverage if the person that you hire can do it better than you can. Because as long as you feel like you're better than them at it, then you're just going to keep second guessing them, and you're not going to get any leverage. And a lot of times, like, I'll be talking to CEOs and they'll have an executive and they'll be like, no, this person's like really good and they're working really hard. And I'm like, well, but like you're always like frustrated about like, you always feel like you have to do that yourself. And it's like, yeah, because they don't understand how to do this and that. And I'm like, well, then like they're not an executive. Because the whole point of an executive is to get you leverage. And so on a question like that, it's like, okay, where can you find the right person and make the hire to get you leverage? And wherever that is, that's what you should give up first. And you want leverage in all spots because as CEO, you can be the keeper of the vision, the quality control over the top, but you can't be the lead engineer forever. Like that, there is no, and it doesn't matter how good an engineer, like Larry Page, as great an engineer as he was, is not an engineer at Google. He just isn't. And he cannot work on production products. It's a full-time job. Even for like somebody who can do as many things as Larry, he cannot do that, and nobody can. Like if Larry can't do it, you can't do it either, I guarantee you. And so you're going to have to give them all up. And so it's just a matter of like, where do you get the leverage?
Thanks. How about right here?
So you mentioned that you were interested in Bitcoin and you guys are invested in Coinbase. But for an asset or money that has fluctuated so crazily in value over the last couple of years, what really makes you so enthusiastic about cryptocurrency in general?
Yes, that's a great question. So the question is, so like you're investors in Bitcoin, you're investors in Coinbase, but it's gone up and it's gone down and it's gone way up and way down and like in Panic and Mt. Gox, he didn't say all that, but that's kind of in the, why do you have any confidence in like cryptocurrency? Why is it going to be a thing? It's fake money, like you're an idiot. No, he didn't say it. He wasn't meaning that. He was actually prompting me to say something good about Bitcoin to shut all you naysayers up. So the thing about Bitcoin, let me kind of break down what cryptocurrency is and why it's important. The first thing to understand is it's a legit computer science breakthrough. So it solves a problem that was first specified, I think, in 1983, called the Byzantine generals problem. And without going into the exact Byzantine generals problem, which is interesting and complicated, think of it like kind of like the dining philosopher's problem for those of you who take computer science. But the big thing that it solved was like the ability to transfer not copy, a piece of digital property from one person to another or one machine to another. So, and in order to do that, you have to basically solve the double spending problem. So a naive version of a kind of electronic money would be you just make up a big set of serial numbers and then you give them out. And so then I give you $1, but the problem with that is you don't know that I didn't give that exact same dollar with that exact same serial number at the same time to Felicia. Like you have no idea that I didn't do that, and that's a hard problem to solve, the double spending problem. So Bitcoin, the original Bitcoin paper and the blockchain kind of technology solves the double spending problem and lets you transfer a piece of digital property from one person to another. So what does this mean? It means that kind of for the first time, and then the way that's been solved through history is like with Visa or something, right? Where they run a ledger that keeps track of all the money that is kind of transferred from one person to another. But the problem with Visa is severalfold. One is that it's a proprietary system, and then it's a reversible system, so there's a large fee associated with it. With Bitcoin, that's solved. There is no person in the middle, so it's the first time that there's a ledger that everybody can use that nobody owns. And the reason that that's important is if you think about what was really powerful in my youth about the internet was it was a network that everybody could use but nobody owned. And what that ends up meaning, or what it ended up meaning on the internet and why the reason that everybody underestimated the internet is when they first saw it, it's like it's got no functionality. You got to plug a yellow cable into the back to get it to, and you've got to call the guy and he's got to send you a 4-octet number and you've got to, and oh, by the way, there's no security at all built into TCP/IP and it'll never be secured and blah, 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 blah. But it was a network that nobody owned. So even though like the IBM networks and AT&T's network and Deutsche Telekom's network were like radically more functional, every new entrepreneur developed on the internet because whatever they built, they got all the value for because nobody owned the network. And so the internet over time became way more functional than any of those guys' networks. And in the same way, we have a very strong belief in the firm that the ledger that nobody owns is going to be the thing that draws all of the developers, and the best payment functionality, wire transfer, foreign currency exchange, and all kinds of other functionality that you can't even imagine now. Just like when people thought of the internet as like, oh, it's the electronic post office or whatever. Well, it's not just a post office, right? Like that metaphor is too weak. Electronic money is actually or money is too weak a metaphor for Bitcoin. But we think that having financial services platform that nobody owns that everybody can benefit from is going to be a very, very big thing as time goes on. And I could give you like a million zillion examples of the kinds of things that might be built if something like that existed. So yes, it's going to fluctuate up and down. Yes, we're in the very early days of it. But if I was, there are two things. Like if I was at Stanford, the two things I would probably be working on would be either cryptocurrency or biohacking. Because that seems to be the two most exciting areas that will develop in huge ways over the next 20, 30 years.
Oh, that was good, wasn't it? That was good. It reminds me, I just had a flashback. So Mark, your partner, came when we first did this series in the 90s. I think you and Mark had just started LoudCloud. So we were in a building that doesn't even exist anymore. It's called Trum, and it now is a pond, or it's not even a pond because there's no water. But then he came back last decade when we were in another building called Skilling, and was super excited about what you were up to at the time. And then to have you here now in 2014. So we'll have to have you both back sometime. That would be something else.
I don't think we've done much together over all the years, so that would be exciting.
Would you like to see both of them together sometime? See, that's called public commitment. I was just trying to close the deal. It's called public commitment. Now we have them on tape. All right, we got time for a couple more. Let's a couple more right here.
Thanks again, Ben, for coming. A lot of students travel into San Francisco Bay Area for school, for work, for exciting opportunities, and it's really an epicenter of technology. But we're starting to see like Boris Wertz up in Vancouver or other VCs kind of spreading out. Mm-hmm. Do you see that changing, or is San Francisco the place to be?
Well,
you're talking about ecosystems. Can you repeat?
So the question is, a lot of people come to San Francisco now to build companies, but there's, there are kind of mini centers popping up all over. And Boris Wertz, who's like a great VC in Vancouver, and then there's Fred Wilson and the Union Square guys in New York and so forth. So do I see kind of Silicon Valley's importance changing over time? So I guess my observation is that people have been saying that for a while, and Silicon Valley seems to keep getting more and more important. Like its importance seems to have been increasing over the last 10 years when all this kind of activity started, not decreasing. And the reason really is the network effect. So if you're the N+1 engineer, and I was just talking to some very excited entrepreneurs before the talk, where are you going to go? Like if you want to be the best in the world, where are you going to go to Vancouver? Are you going to go to Austin? Are you going to go to Silicon Valley? And most people go to Silicon Valley when they ask themselves that question. And so as a result, Silicon Valley is still by far the easiest place to build a really important technology company. And it's, it's a technology company is not a standalone thing, right? Like you have to understand everything that's going on in Android and iOS and with Bitcoin and what's going on in cloud computing and so forth to be competitive. It's an ecosystem thing, and there's certainly nowhere in the world where the ecosystem, like you have this kind of ecosystem awareness. And then as you go to build a company, where are the people who have built companies that are somewhat like it in the past? Well, like most of them are here, so like the ability to accelerate the trajectory of your company by bringing in talent. So not that other places won't do it, but it is a very strong network effect. And the way I say, like, look, you could you can make a movie outside of Hollywood. You can make one in South Dakota, but you're not going to get the best director. You're not going to get the best actresses. You're not going to get the best key grip because they're all in Hollywood. And it's a lot easier to make a movie than it is to build a technology company. So you just have to kind of consider these things as you think about it. Now, it's not to say that, like I was on the board of Skype, which is built in Estonia. And like there are some like amazing engineers in Estonia, and they've built, and more good companies will come out of Estonia, mark my words. But whereas like the repeatable, like $10 billion market cap, like mega companies, like most of them, I think will continue to come out of Silicon Valley. And then you look at what's going on in China, it's quite amazing as well. So I'm not saying this is the only place that you can build things, but I don't think it's going to lose its importance.
I know there's a lot more questions, but we're winding down. What question did I forget to ask, or we didn't get to ask? You can ask yourself a question.
Sometimes I ask.
We're flipping this right now. What did we forget to ask? Did we cover it all?
Yeah, I think we covered most of it.
What does it take to be married for 25 years? I mean, you come up here and answer that. Let's thank Felicia and Ben for being here.
Thank you. Thank you.